What's going on, y'all? This is Sam Thory. We're just going through part 2 of setting up an AI content creation kit for your internal business. This could be used for agency to have a single source of truth for all of their content that they can then pull from, build blog articles, videos, images, whatever they might need, all in one place. And then this is hitting a content system, a RAG, structured content where it'll pull from what it already has and generate from there. We can also set up some cron jobs, some timed jobs that will do this on a weekly basis or a daily basis, creating a LinkedIn post for you that is relevant to what's going on in the news on AI or whatever it might be. So in the first video, we did our initial setup. We're using a Next.js starter with LangChain. And in that video, we installed it locally, got it running locally, set up Biome instead of using ESLint and Prettier, and set up Husky to use Biome for Git hooks. So whenever we add, commit, or push, we're doing format checks and checking the actual commit message to make sure it's in the right format and just checking for errors before we push up. So that's all good stuff to start your project. In this video, we're going to set up user authentication using Clerk. We're going to set up our database using Supabase. And we're going to implement connection pooling for just to ensure efficient access. And we'll also secure our routes with middleware, Next.js middleware. So it'll be a really interesting video. There's some big topics to go over there, obviously. So we already talked about the previous video. So just a recap of what we'll go through. We're going to integrate Clerk for user authentication, design and implement the database schema, set up Supabase and its extensions, configure connection pooling for efficiency, and protect routes using middleware for added security. So all good stuff. I think we can jump right into our setting up the Clerk authentication. So this will be the first part of the video. Obviously, there's several different options for authentication. Supabase has its own authentication that I've used in different projects, and it works just fine. I haven't used Clerk. I know it's very popular. So we're going to get it started from scratch. I have a basic implementation guide that I will follow. Hopefully things will go well. So again, we're fairly new to Clerk here, so we're going to go in first things first and go to Clerk here. And we need to create an account. So we'll get started and we'll connect it with our Google. And I am human. So we'll go to this one here. Continue. All right. We're going to call this Raleigh AI Content Creator. Sign-in options. That's cool. Connect with Google. We can also add different sign-in options. So this would be for our app. But for us, it's really only going to be for our company. We're a Google Workspace company, so we'll use Google. We could also do email, but that's fine. So we'll sign in here. Oh, I need to create the application, sorry. All right. So we've created our application. We can go over to Next.js for a guide here. Oh, it's already set up here, sorry. So we have our initial there. Hold on one second. Just make sure that I'm not getting ahead of myself here. So first we're going to take this, but obviously we're using PM. Let me take, actually this might be over here. We'll go into our project right here. And I have a terminal set up here. We're just running PM add @clerk/Next.js. We're all set with that. And we can go back over to the documentation here. And you'll see that we need some keys set up. So we can go over here. Let's see, the next Clerk publishable key is right here. So we can take that. And I'm going to open this up over in another monitor so y'all can't see my secrets. But I'm putting this into my env.local. That's all set. Go back over here and it looks like we also need this Clerk secret key. So I'll go over here, choose your framework, and paste the code into your environment file. So I think I can just copy this whole thing. See how this works. Cool. That did work. And again, I'm in another window here so y'all don't see my stuff. So looking good there. We can go back over to the documentation now. And we have our middleware here. So let's see if we're getting ahead of ourselves now. Doesn't look like it's still on track. So we can go here. We don't have anything in our middleware yet. We actually don't have a middleware file. This will go at our root directory. So we're gonna just hit here, new file. This is gonna be called middleware.ts, and it does have to be called that. So make sure that it is. And first things first, we're gonna import auth middleware, and it looks like we have some help from our friend Cursor there. And let's see, this is fairly close. So the public routes, we want //sign in /sign up. This is good. Nord routes, we want /API/public. So this is also important to have. Then we go here, export const config, and we have a matcher style here. So this is essentially saying, as long as it matches this regex here, go ahead and run. Whoop, don't want to do that. So this is all for some kind of bundled Next.js file or JS files. So we think it's actually maybe skipping this. And then we'll end up having /API and /TRPC. So this is where it's going to go. So we have our matcher set up. We're all good there. And then the next thing we want to do is wrap our entire app with the Clerk providers. So that's essentially going to give Clerk access to our full app, context for our full app. So we go over to our layout, and we already have a lot of stuff built into our layout here from the starter template. It's not the way that we're going to do this at all. This is all going to be through generate metadata, so we don't really want to use the head at all. So we can take this out, and we'll add generate metadata. But to be honest, we don't really care about metadata that much because this isn't going to be like a public app. If it were, we would change it up. We can definitely go over that as well. It's not important for now. So what we're going to do is take, oops, had some lag there. We're going to take the whole app and wrap it in this Clerk provider, which we're going to need to import, which it automatically did for us with Cursor. And we move this down here, and we should be all set. We should have access to Clerk throughout the app, and our middleware should be set up to allow for the homepage /sign in and /sign up. So if we go over here to our app that we have running, nothing should happen on this guy. Let's see for this one. So we're getting the site can't be reached. Let's just make sure we're still running. I might have closed it. That's silly. Maybe we had an error. Invalid middleware found. Let's see, I think it's because I accidentally deleted it for a second there. And Next.js just shut down. If it finds invalid middleware, it'll just boot out sometimes. So we'll come back over here, and we should be running now. So it looks like we had some out-of-date middleware. This may have just been updated, and what I scanned from Cursor didn't pick that up. That's okay. So we'll take this here, copy the whole middleware.ts, and come back over here to our middleware.ts file here, and we'll throw this in. Oops, there we go. All right, now we're looking a lot better. We don't have that error, which I didn't even see. We also see a lot of changes to our matcher to pick up a lot of different file types. So that's all right. We'll go back over, and we should not see that error anymore when we run. Let's take a look. Hey, so we're back up and running. All good. And we can continue on. I think we're all set with our Clerk. Let's go ahead and check one of the other routes here. Oh, we can just hit one of these. Let's see what we have in our terminal. So we don't have any errors, but I don't see any actual protected routes yet. We will set that up later, so that's okay. Now we have our basic instance running here. Let's go over now to our Supabase setup. And what we're going to do first and foremost, whoops, don't want to do that. We'll go into Supabase, open up our Supabase. Excuse me. We've started this project here. I went ahead, we have an organization, and I started a new project in the organization called Raleigh AI Content Creator. And that's pretty much it so far. So we haven't done any other work other than we did a test on creating a table that we'll do later. But we'll go through that instead of just running it. From here, we do need to connect this to our app. So there's two things that we need straight out of the gate, and that's going to be our URL and our next public Supabase anon key. These can be found, let's see, if we go to project settings, general integrations, API maybe. So here's our URL and here's our anon. We're going to take that, and again, I have to open this up on another screen. I'm going to take that and drop it into my env.local. And for this project, it's also asking us for a Supabase private key, which is going to be an API key. So what we're going to need to do there, oh, 1 second here. Make sure that I have the name of the variable correct. All set there. We also need our API key. So if we go in here, let's see. So our API key is going to be this service role. It's basically our secret key. We don't want to reveal it on screen, at least. That would be bad. So I'll take this over here and you get to look at a blank screen while I do this. I'm going to copy it and I'll refresh so I don't have that showing anymore. Very good. I'm going to drop this in too. So one last thing off screen here and then we're good to go. So we have our private key, we have our Supabase URL, we have our next public Supabase anonymous key, we have our next public clerk publishable key, and our clerk secret key. So we've set up a lot of secret keys and stuff that we're going to need for this project. It's really good. Let's go back over to the beginning of our actual database. So what we need to do is set up our tables. We need a users table. So what we're going to do is go into our SQL editor, and I'm going to take this little piece that I created earlier and drop this in. We can go over it. So we're going to create a table called users, which has a unique ID. This is the primary key, basically. We have an email, username, created at, updated at, and profile image URL. So we can go ahead and run this. Cool, all good there. We need to look at our vector store setup. So this is something I already did, but we can go ahead and do it again. And it'll just tell us that we've already done it. Let's see here. 1 second, just gonna get the box. So in this retrieval section, you see for Supabase, follow these instructions. So we scroll down here, we see that we need this at langchain / community at langchain / core at Supabase / Supabase.js at langchain / OpenAI. So let's copy that and let me just pull my code back over here. Just dropping this in here. All right, all set there. And I'll give you guys a link to this as well so you have access. But it is in the docs of that original GitHub URL for the starter template, so you can check there. So once you've created a database, run the following SQL to set up pgvector and create the necessary table and functions. Go ahead and do that. Copy. And we just go over to SQL, Supabase. We're going to take this out. And just like we did with the create table users, we'll drop this in here. And this is going to create a table documents with a big serial ID, content, metadata, embedding vector. We're creating a function to search for the documents where we're querying that embedded vector, matching, filtering off the JSON, and we're getting some stuff back there. So this is great. We'll go ahead and run this, and we see extension vector already exists. That's what we expected. We already created this earlier. If we go over to our table editor, now we see, obviously we have the users table that we created just a moment ago with all those fields that we expected. We also have document. So this is ID, content, metadata, embedding. So this is essential for setting up our reg system with Supabase and this code base. So we're all good there. Let's go back and make sure we're not missing anything on that documentation. Obviously, we did this Supabase private key, Supabase URL. We have our open API key already in there. We did that in the last article. We actually have these as well, but I don't know if we've implemented them yet. But if you want to get automated tracing of your model calls, you can also set your Langsmith API key. So now we get down into the instantiation there. So we're going to wait on that for a little bit. We do still have to set up some other tables. So we'll go back over to Supabase, to the SQL editor, and we'll take this guy here. And we can just remove everything here. All right. So now we have this new table called content, ID, user ID, table, title, body, status. Could be draft, published, or archived. Default is draft. So this is when we create new content. This is going to be the basic setup there. Go ahead and run that. We should have a new table if we go over to table editor. We do. Everything looks good. Now we can keep on going. And we're going to need to create a metadata table. Whoops. So we'll go back over to our SQL editor. And I have this copied now. Oops. The wrong one. Of course. All right, here's our table for metadata. We have ID, content ID, so this is going to reference the content table based on the ID, the key, value, and created at. So we go ahead and run this, and we're going to have our metadata table. And now we need to enable RLS for added protection. So we'll go in here, and let me just take this here. We're going to do a few different commands in our SQL editor here. We have alter table users, enable row level security, alter table content, alter table metadata, create policy users can read own data on users for select using auth.uid equals ID. Sorry, I clicked the mouse button. We'll run that, and now we have RLS for these three tables. That's very good. So since we're using Supabase as our BAAS, our backend as a service, we need to go ahead and get this set up in our code base. So we have already created our account, our project. We got past that. We've installed Supabase/Supabase.js. We have our environment variables. Now we need to initialize the client. After reviewing my documentation, I just need to make a couple of changes here. First things first, we want more than just this users can read own data. We're going to take these as well. So I can take all of this because it's already been done. We're going to create a policy for users can manage own content and users can manage own metadata. We're allowing for that. So we're going to go ahead and run this as well. We're good. And now we can move on to setting up the code in our code base here. So we'll go over here and we're going to go ahead and create a new file in lib. I have this, I'm going to kill this actually. Delete to trash. So in lib, we're going to create a new file, and this is going to be called Supabase client.ts. And this is just going to be an initialization file, basically. Some boilerplate that we'll have set up here. Very simple. I'll just go ahead and paste this in. So we're going to import create client. We're getting our Supabase URL from our EMVs, our Supabase anonymous key from our EMVs, and we're creating our client with those. One thing we do need to do is go into Supabase one more time, and we need to enable the pgvector extension for vector similarity search. So this is an extension that we can get in Supabase fairly easy. We just go back over to our SQL editor. Very useful. And we're just going to create extension if not exists, just checking to see if it exists already, called vector. So it's looking for that specific extension called vector. And we are successful, so we know that we have installed that extension, which is great. All right, so now we can come back over here and continue our client setup. So we're going to need a couple of files for Supabase. We'll go in here to our lib, create a new folder called Supabase, and we're going to set up our server side. This is server.ts, and go in here and we'll probably get some help. Create server client, that's good. We're going to import cookies from next headers. Actually want to do create client, not server client. We do this, open it up, and now we're back on track. Const cookie store equals cookies, return. It's got server client cookie store. No, actually, we want this here. So we're gonna have two variables here. Process.env.next public Supabase URL. It did, whoop, not abort. Come on now. There we go. And next public Supabase anonymous key. So we're all good there. And then this cookies is close, but not exactly actually. So this is not going to be like that, but it'll be more like this here. And we have get, it's a string. And we have return cookie store.get name.value. Should be good there. Let's see what's going on here. Pretty sure I did add this, but let's add it again for good measure. And if not, we might just need to reload our window. That's fine. Happens sometimes. All right, all set with that. All right, so we can continue on. We have our server side set up. Now we need to go to the client side. So essentially we can use Supabase now on our server side components and our client side components when we've set this up. So sometimes, and really whenever we can, we're going to pull it from the server side because that'll be a lot faster and we're not doing it on re-render. But if we do need to do a use effect where we're pulling it in new data all of the time, then maybe we need to use it on the client. So we have to have both. So we set up our client.ts in that Supabase folder and import our create client from not Supabase SSR, but Supabase JS. JS. There we go. And there we go. We want all of that. So we're doing the same thing we did earlier. Not quite ready for that last line. We're going to do this here. Yep. Throw new error, missing environment variables. Perfect. And then export const Supabase equals create client Supabase URL, Supabase and non-key. And we're actually going to add something here. So auth persist session equals false. There we go. So this will say, because we're using a Clerk, we're going to pass that over. It won't be Supabase's job there. So we're all set up there. And now we want to move on to connection pooling setup. Essentially, what is connection pooling? It's going to improve our performance by reusing database connections. This allows multiple clients to share a pool of database connections, reducing the overhead of establishing new connections each time a request is made. This helps improve the performance and scalability of your application, especially during high traffic periods. So when we get to the implementation here, we're going to have several parts here. We have our pgBouncer set up. So this is how Supabase supports connection pooling, manages and reuses our existing database connections. We need to enable database connection pooling in Supabase. So we're going to go over to our Supabase project settings. I lost my mouse. Where's my mouse? There it is. Go to our project settings. Under the database tab, we should have something allowing us to enable connection pooling. Pool mode is permanently set to transaction on port 6543. You can use session mode by connecting to the pooler on port 5432. All right, guys, looks like I missed it right at the top here. So go ahead and copy this in here and we'll pull this off because we have to put it into our EMV. So this is, let's see what it's called here. All right, so this is going to be called our next public Supabase pool URL. So I'm going to pull that in off camera here, equals, and I'll come back over to another file. So we hide that and we're good to go. Oh, actually one thing, I have to change my password in there. All set there. All right, so now that we have that set up in our EMV variables, we can go back to the code here to our Supabase client file, which we created earlier, right here. And we're just going to make an update here. We have these two variables already set up. We're going to do the const Supabase pool URL, and we'll change this to pool URL or Supabase URL. So if it doesn't find that pool URL, it'll fall back to the regular Supabase URL. So that's fine. Excuse me. So we're all set there. And now just give me 1 second. All right. So now that we've set up our connection pooling, which is great, we need to set up our protected routes in middleware. So we already have a basis for our middleware. We're going to add on to it. So we'll go in here. First of all, we need to do this to ensure only authenticated users can access these certain routes. And to ensure that certain pages and API routes are accessible only to authenticated users, it's crucial to implement protected routes. This is where the middleware comes in handy. So we've already created our middleware file right here, and we're going to make some updates here. So we have, let's see, this, we can do import with Clerk middleware from at clerk slash Next.js slash server. Might not have that actually. We may be good with the original there. And we're going to do import next response from next server. So in here, we have our our clerk middleware that we're now going to open up and do a rec return, next response dot next. And we're going to change this here to match slash protected slash path, which will define which paths to protect. So anything in that slash protected route will need to be authenticated. So instead of removing this for now, let's keep that because I believe that'll still be useful. But we also want to run it for this protected path. So all good there. So now let's just scroll down a little bit. So now we have our protected API routes. Oh, using Clerk's authentication and API routes. So use Clerk's require auth function to protect API routes. Create a new API route. For example, we could do our protected slash route.tsx. So we'll go into our app and create a new folder called protected and a new file called route.ts. And that allows Next.js to know that that's an API route. If it was page.tsx, we know it's like a client page. So we're going to go in here, we're going to import require auth from at clerk slash Next.js slash API. No, server. Make sure this catches up because that should be good. All right, looks like we had an old documentation reference from ChatGPT, which happens sometimes. We fed the new documentation in to Cursor and updated our outline for this video here for this last part. So what we're going to do first is go back to our middleware file. What we had initially was actually correct. So we're going to go back into here and just give me 1 second. I'm freezing up. Take this here, replace it back. So this is what we initially had, but this, I'm going back one more time because it still didn't pull up the right documentation here. So if I go directly into the Clerk docs, we have our configure Clerk middleware. This is what we initially had. So we're going to take this, drop it in here, and now we're good to go. My goodness. So if we go back to this documentation, create route matcher is a Clerk helper function that allows you to protect multiple routes in the following example sets. So this we could, it looks like we could protect routes from the middle, which is cool. Or we can also protect the routes from our actual server side or client side. So with using the auth.protect and stuff like that. So what we're gonna do, and looks like you can do that here too. Auth.protect, cool. All right, that's perfect. That's very cool. User authorization status, multiple groups of routes. So it looks like everything can be really handled from middleware if we'd like. We can combine middleware, we know this. Let's look at the auth object. The auth has all of these things. They are so good. So here we have some examples. If we look at this one, we're on a page.tsx. So this is going to be a server side. And so if we go ahead and implement this, let's just take this here. We're going to copy the whole thing. Obviously, we're not going to use the whole thing, but it'll be easier to just pull it in. We can go over to our page.tsx, our root file, root route, drop this in. We need that. We need to take this and drop it in. And now, if we go over to our root route, we do need to make that async. Call cursor. Thank you. I appreciate that. We need to go to our root. There you go. Unless I went too far. Hold on. Localhost 3001. All right, perfect. So if I continue with Google, let's see if I can actually sign in. And it does allow me to sign in, so I must be a Clerk user already, which would make sense since I created the account. So that's great. We got it working there. Let's see what else we could do. So if we wanted to, that's on the server side. API routes. We're not going to get into API routes as much because we're probably going to use server actions as much as possible. And there's documentation for that we can go into as well. Auth.protect that we talked about. This can give us a little bit more granular permissions. So we can set a role, we can set the type of permission that they can have, manage posts, or create posts, or delete posts, or just read. All of those things we can do. And then in the client components, we can do conditional rendering using our couple of, sorry, we have this right here. Let's go over to the clerks actually, since that's not pulling up correctly. Auth object. So all of our client side work will be done through these built-in hooks from Clerk. So we have use user, use Clerk, use auth, use sign in. If we go to use auth, let's see what we get there. We have an is signed in Boolean, is loaded, user ID, session ID. So if we hit this on one of our client side routes, which we can use hooks in, we're going to see if the user is signed in, and we can protect a certain component within a route or within a page. Not maybe they can see the whole page, but not this one little piece of it. So a lot of different things that we can do with Clerk. It has pretty robust set of hooks for us to use here. We can get the organization information. This isn't going to be that important for our project though. Like really, all we care about is a few users. It's a very small company. If we had a large company, maybe it would be more important, but still all of the organization members would be the same organization. It's one way you could check it though. Um, so that's great. So we have a lot of information there that we needed. We're pretty much all set. So we've locked down our our home page. We could do the same for all of these other pages, but we're not going to do that quite yet. Oh, I'm sorry, this is the wrong. Oh, no, that's the right one. I'm sorry. We have this home page, but we also have /AI. Let's see. Our utils retrieval. So here we have our page.tsx. So we could probably get some help from, there we go. There we go. And so now if a user isn't signed into this route, we're all set. It will redirect to the sign-in page, which is great. We can do the same thing here. And we'll just let cursor take the wheel. And good to go. Structured output. All right. So we've set up all of our protected routes there, I think. We have this best API route that we can also protect. Let's not go into that quite yet, though, because we really don't need to do all of that quite yet. This is great. We got a good setup there. Let me just double check, make sure I'm not missing anything. But I believe that we've covered everything we're going to cover in this setup. So we've gone through Clerk, the initial setup, and protecting our routes, setting up the middleware. And remember for that one, let's make sure that we have the most up-to-date documentation so that's not pulling the wrong middleware file. I'm sorry, the wrong information. Always double check ChatGPT. Actually, for this video, I built it out in ChatGPT first, pulled it into Cursor, and we still had some errors that we had to work through. None of them were really fatal. We got through them, no big deal. We created all of our tables in Supabase. We set up our row level security. We set up our PG vector. We added the extension for vector. Got all of our different EMV variables in place. We set up our code for the code base for Supabase. We have our client and server side. This is great. Really important stuff there. And looks like this may be out of date as well. We might need to check that. That's okay. We're not going to be doing anything with Supabase quite yet, so that's all right. Next video we will. We have our client side as well, right here. And we set up our connection pooling. So we brought in that separate URL for that that will back up to our Supabase URL if it doesn't find that. After that, we set up all of our protected routes in our middleware. So if we go over to our middleware, again, this is pulling straight from the Clerk documentation. We had multiple attempts at this. The initial attempt was actually the one that we should have stayed with the entire time. I should have just kept with the documentation. But we're all good now with that. And then we went into each of our individual routes and we're checking to see if we have a user ID. If not, redirect to sign in. We could also do is signed in. This is basically the same check, so it's okay. We set that up on all of our routes really quickly, especially with the help of Cursor because it was very duplicative. So once it figured out how to do it once, it was able to drop that in the other ones very simply. So we did a lot. Clerk, Supabase, protected routes, middleware, went over quite a bit. So the next step is really setting up that API layer using our server actions as much as possible. We also will have some API routes. And we want to do this in the safest TypeScript way using TRPC. A lot of server actions now actually solve for this where it's not even an issue anymore, but TRPC is really nice. I love it. So we'll set up our router for TRPC, convert our API routes to be using TRPC, and then secure those routes with Clerk. So that's something that we talked about doing. We will end up doing that. My dog is ready to end this video as well. We'll also cover request validation to ensure robust, type-safe communication between the front end and back end of our platform. So let's just go into a deeper understanding of what TRPC is doing. That's it. So we covered a lot in this video. I appreciate y'all staying with me through some of the hiccups that we had, but we worked through. Make sure to like and subscribe and hit the notifications button so that you'll see when the next video comes out that we'll be talking about the full setup of TRPC. So thank you for watching and have a good one.